on time before the deadline that was provided, that is the end of this month. Now, today's presentation is really a follow-up of what happened last week. Last week, we looked at, Isabella, my colleague, looked at the first part of the registration, which is the applicant, the details that you're required to put to place in there. And also, she also assisted you to know who should be appointed as a data protection officer and how to fill in that information. Today's presentation is going to really look at the next two parts, that is data collected or processed, and purpose and retention. We shall have a practical bit where we shall look at the portal itself and be able to carry out those, the filling, the completion of those two parts. But then to start, I'll just have to, I'll also provide an introduction, and I'll start by helping us understand what data protection generally is, but also what benefits are there in complying with the data protection and privacy laws of Uganda. So Uganda currently has three major laws under data protection and privacy. That is the Constitution of Uganda, the Data Protection and Privacy Act, and the Data Protection and Privacy Regulations. The Constitution of Uganda under Article 27 provides for the right to privacy and protects all information of people, correspondences, communication, and homes from access without consent. In 2019, the government saw it fit to have a standalone law to provide for all matters related to data protection and privacy. That is, all matters related to your personal data and the personal data of beneficiaries of organizations. And this law comprehensively and adequately provides for all things related to the principles on how that personal data should be collected, on registration with the Personal Data Protection Office, on the rights of individuals whose personal data is collected, and therefore provides for the protection of privacy of such individuals, as well as regulates collection and processing of personal data. Who does this law apply to? It has both a territorial and extraterritorial scope. This means that it applies to entities within Uganda, that includes even NGOs that collect and process or use personal data of any person living within Uganda. That is the territorial scope. Extraterritorial means that even where an entity outside Uganda collects and utilizes or uses, stores and discloses the personal data of any Ugandan citizens, this law still applies to such an entity. So it's important for us to note that where an NGO collects or uses any personal data means any information that can identify a person. So in case you collect, let us say someone's name, their age, whether they're an employee or they're a beneficiary of your services, this law applies to you and you have to comply. The material scope is that it applies to both personal data that is collected and processed through automated or non-automated means. Automated means where there is less human intervention. For example, you have a system where people maybe place a hand and the door opens. That means it collects the information. When they place their hand on a biometric, the door opens because it is able to verify that it is this particular individual. But non-automated also is where there is actual human intervention. Let us say, for example, you go into the field and you collect personal data using registration forms. You collect personal data at a training of a specific community, that this law still applies. So compliance with this law, it's important for us to note at this point that compliance starts with registration. It's the reason why we are emphasizing that all NGOs need to register, all entities, all persons who collect and process personal data have to register, but registration is not the only requirement to comply. There are a number of other obligations that we shall know as we go on. Yes, so this law is also established an office, the office that we are from, which is the Personal Data Protection Office. It is an independent office established by an act of parliament, that is the Data Protection and Privacy Act and the regulations therein. And it has a number of functions, which of course we refer to as the mandate. The first being overseeing implementation and enforcement of the act. How do we do this? It's ensuring that one, all entities that collect and process personal data are complying with the law, therefore are collecting and using personal data within the precincts of the law. The other one is, of course, to monitor and investigate observance of the right to privacy. The office reports to the ministry and OPM each year on the progress of entities complying with the laws. The other one is establishing and maintaining a data protection register. Currently, when you go to our portal, there is a part which has such register, the register of all entities that have completed registration is public to all individuals. So as long as you go to that particular part of our portal, you're able to know everyone who has registered. The other one is to set, monitor, and regulate standards of personal data protection, then also conducting audits to ensure compliance by data controllers and data processors, and then to investigate, to receive and investigate complaints relating to the violation of the Act. So this office, part of its mandate is also to conduct audits. The office decides on a number of entities at the start of the financial year, reaches out to them and conducts audits to verify whether they are compliant with the processes that are required under this law. But also, in case an entity infringes on a right of a person whose personal data they collect, that person has a right to complain to us. And where such a complaint is made, we have the power to carry out an investigation, where the investigation ends in penalties, or at times, of course, it ends in penalties where the person is found to be liable. So I'll look at what importance is complying with the Data Protection and Privacy Act and the regulations. The first one is better data management. Now, under data protection and privacy, we majorly look at controls. We look at the administrative controls, we look at technical controls and physical controls. I'll talk majorly about the administrative controls, which are policies. After registration, one of the major things that we require from entities is for them to develop policies that are the privacy policy, a privacy notice, a records management policy, and an information security policy. So these policies usually speak to the kind of personal data that you collect as an organization. They speak to how you protect that personal data, how you store it, whether you share it out with any persons, including your head office, for example, or any other regulators. And so if you have this kind of policies in place, of course, you'd be able to understand the kind of personal data that you collect, because it's actually written in a policy. Your employees would also know what they're expected to collect and not collect more than that. But also you'd know the level of storage you have to give to specific categories of personal data, and also who you share it to. So it is important for entities to comply, because these administrative controls, which the policies I've spoken about, guide you on the kind of personal data you collect, how you store it, and also how you use it, and also, in fact, guide your employees because they are made for them. The other, of course, is improve community trust and confidence. Now, like I've already said, data protection and privacy is really about you ensuring that the personal data that you collect as an organization is kept safe, its integrity is maintained. So where a person is sure that I'm able to give organization A my information, including my medical records, and I'll not find it maybe on a local tabloid, that person would easily give it to you even the next time, and for you to be able to provide them with these different services. However, if they know that you're not complying with these laws, they know that if they give you their personal data, you're going to maybe transfer it to a country which they actually do not know about. You're going to share it with maybe a local tabloid for it to be written in a newspaper. They would lose confidence in you as an organization. So it's important that organizations comply with these laws, because these laws help you to understand how to protect the personal data that you collect, but also it's important for you to register, because non-registration in itself is non-compliance. And therefore, if the public knows that you've not registered, you're not complying with the laws, they would also have a reason not to believe that you actually have the right measures in place to keep their personal data. The other, of course, is to avoid potential fines and imprisonment. Whereas this law provides for obligations of organizations and persons who collect personal data, it also prescribes penalties where there's non-compliance. These penalties are both to the organization, but also can be to individual officers who willingly let the compliance, the non-compliance to happen. So it has both corporate liability and individual liability. So to avoid this kind of fines and imprisonment, it's important for you to comply with the data protection and privacy laws. Now also to staff, it's important for us not to forget that as staff during onboarding, your personal data is also collected. So if an entity is compliant, if an entity has registered, it is complying with all the obligations under the law. You as staff who provide your information, including medical records for processing of health or medical insurance, assure that the personal data that you've given is actually is going to be kept safe, and of course your privacy will be protected. The other one, of course, is as an organization, let us say, for example, a human rights related organization, your first role is to ensure that rights are being protected. This law particularly also has rights that it provides or recognizes for individuals. So while complying with this law, you as an organization will be respecting the rights of individuals that are provided under the data protection and privacy law. Now, you'll allow me to just go off the screen for us to start a practical bit on how to register. We'll start with how to create an account and then move towards what should be filled in the different sections under registration. Okay, to register, the first step is, of course, you type on your Google or whichever browser you're using, www.pdpo.go.ug. It will bring you to our website, which looks like this. Now, the first stage, like I already said, is to create an account. And to create an account, if it's your first time, you tap on register. Now, under register, there's some information we require from you for you to be able to have an account. The first one is the name of the organization that you're registering. The other one is the organization email address, which should be an email address that you have access to, because some information will be shared there for you to be able to open your account. The other one is an organization, the organization telephone number, and of course, your first name and the last name of the person who is registering. So after filling in this information, you click submit, and upon clicking submit, it will automatically send you information to the email address provided here with your username and a password. After you doing that, you go to that email address, of course, pick that password. Now, this time you'll instead tap on login. When you come back to this website, you'll tap on login this time because you already have an account that has been created. You'll fill in the details of the email address, which is the username that has been given to you. And then you'll also type the password that has been provided. Now, as soon as you type this password that has been provided, you'll be automatically required to change your password to one that is now owned by yourself. Now, for me, I already have an account which I'm going to use, and that is why I've already entered this information. So this is how the account will look when you open it. It will show you here a dashboard which includes report or notify breaches and also company registration. This particular presentation is on registration. So to register, you will now tap registration and come to new application. Under the new application, you'll see 6 different stages of the registration. These first 2 stages were handled last week. And in case you want to maybe revisit or to understand them better, you can still go to our YouTube channel, like Anita earlier stated. You'll be able to get that information. However, what is majorly required in the first step is for you to provide us information of your organization's name, the telephone number. These are already auto-populated. because you filled them in earlier. What we shall require from you is to fill in the category. The category means what category is your entity? From the options, there is a data collector, data processor, and data controller. Data collector means an entity organization that collects personal data. So if an organization collects personal data, you check the box of data collector. If an entity also processes personal data, processes simply means that a data processor, a data processor is an entity which is not an employee of the data controller, but uses personal data on behalf of a data controller. So data controller, maybe before I go back to data processor again, let's just restart. Data collector organization collects personal data. Data controller means an organization that determines how personal data is used. So let us say an employee comes into the organization, but to onboard them, you require them to provide you with their national ID, their academic qualifications, and different other personal data. At that point, an organization is a data collector. However, if the organization decides to pay that employee using a bank account name the employee provided, that entity is determining how the personal data is used. So where you determine how the personal data is used, you become a data controller. So if you're a data collector, you check the box of data collector. However, if that entity determines, for example, how beneficiaries' personal data is used, let us say, for example, you go into the community, collect beneficiaries' information. After collecting that information, you determine that you are going to maybe provide school fees to students. If you determine that, you check both the box of data collector and the one of also data controller. Now, data processor means a person who is not an employee or an organization which is not an employee of the data controller, but uses personal data on behalf of the data controller. So let us say, for example, as an organization, you receive some information from other entities, other organizations, and using this information, you provide services to given beneficiaries. You do not necessarily collect that information. You do not necessarily determine how that information is used, but you provide the service because you have been given information to provide the service. If you do that, you also become a data processor. So it's important for us to take home here that an organization can be all the three. It can be a data collector by collecting, data controller by determining, but also a data processor where it receives information from another entity to provide a given service to some beneficiaries. The rest of these others, a type of organization, you'd pick on NGO. There are different categories here that you'll see. There is country of incorporation. You choose the one that is relevant to you. Also the registration number, sector. Okay. And also you can specify the offer, the sector. Yeah, so under sector, there are a number of also different sectors that you can choose from. It could be the telecommunications sector. However, if the one that the organization is under is not specifically provided here, you choose other, and then you have to specify that sector here. You have to specify that sector here. Then, of course, you also have to provide us with the physical address of the organization, the nature of business categories, and also the nature of business. Just a minute. The nature of business subcategories. So under business categories, here we're talking about the lump sum. Is it education? Is it human health and social work activities? How about under nature of business subcategories? Which ones are those? So these ones you just have to, whatever you tap under business categories will provide you with an option under business subcategories. So these ones are really for you I really check boxes which you have to look through and make a determination that is relevant to your organization. The second part, which has also looked at last year, is about the data protection officer. So we guide that all entities that collect and process personal data should have a data protection officer, because this officer is our point of contact in case an entity suffers a breach of the personal data that it collects, or let us say, for example, an entity, there's a complaint that is brought against an entity, would want to have a point of contact. And like Isabella said last week, this point of contact is, you can decide from either appointing or recruiting a new person, or also just adding a role to an officer who already has a role within the entity. So here, what should provide us is the name of that officer, their physical address, their phone number, email address, as well as the title they hold in that entity. Let me just fill this in. So yes, this is the kind of information we shall require from you in this stage. Now, my presentation today is really about these two next stages. The first one being data collected and processed, and the other being purpose and retention. So under data collected and processed, here we have two parts that you need to fill in. The first one is on source of data, and then the other one is on personal data collected and processed. So under source of data, we want to know from which persons you collect personal data. What are the categories of persons from whom you collect the personal data that you as an entity require? So these are also referred to as data subjects under data protection, the persons from whom you collect personal data. And when you tap this box, you'll see some different categories of persons. The first one being employees. So if an entity has employees, usually before an employee is actually onboarded, you require from them some information to be able to create maybe an employee file, to be able, of course, to know them as an employee. As long as you require their name, their age, any kind of information, you need to start by checking that box of employees. The next one is clients or customers. Of course, there have been a lot of questions by NGOs that for us we do not necessarily have clients or customers, but we have beneficiaries. Now, clients could be your beneficiaries also. Where you have beneficiaries and you collect their personal data, those beneficiaries are under this part of clients, so you have to check that box. The other one is suppliers, contractors. Now, during procurement, usually, there is some information you as an organization may require from directors or managers of entities that you enter into contracts with. Also, even during contract signing, you may require them to maybe provide a national ID, provide information about themselves, telephone number. As long as an entity does that, you also need to check the box of suppliers, contractors. This particular one is for majorly government, where a specific regulator collects information from regulated entities. That government would be the one, a government body would be the one to check this box. Therefore, if an NGO does not regulate, or as it is actually in Uganda, NGOs do not regulate any other kind of entities, you do not need to check the box of regulated or licensed entities. The other one is visitors or guests. Under visitors or guests, if you have, for example, a visitor's book at your door and you receive information of visitors, they provide you with their information before they gain access to your premises, you need to check this box of visitors or guests. So like I said, the first part here is for us to know from which persons we collect, what categories of persons we collect personal data. And these are collectively referred to as data subjects in data protection and privacy. The next part is for us to know the specific personal data that is collected from those groups. So it's important for us to know that these things are actually intertwined. If you collect, for example, information from employees, we shall expect that you maybe collect information on their education qualifications, as we shall see later. If you collect information from clients, or let us say beneficiaries, we shall expect that there is some information you actually collect. So all we want here now is for you to break down that information. The first one is under identifiers. Identifiers are simply unique personal data that is provided. And this kind of personal data is unique to an individual, yeah? Let us say, for example, a person's name, nationality, their age. So while doing this, it's important for you to have the sources that you placed up in mind. If, for example, employees, you collect their names, nationality, age, marital status, you should check all those. If it's what you collect for your beneficiaries, if it's what you collect for your suppliers or visitors, ensure to check all those that are relevant. Under individuals' commercial information, here we are looking at ownership. Yeah. So some organizations, for example, guarantee loans of their staff. And while guaranteeing these loans, you may require a person to maybe provide you with a land title. At times also some NGOs that do work related to farming may require farmers to provide some information on the land that they have. As long as you do that, now, for example, as you see here, it has records of personal property or purchasing habits. In case you do any of these, you have to check that box, the relevant box. The other one is on sensory data. Sensory data is really personal data collected by the sensors that we have. So if, for example, you have a CCTV camera and that CCTV camera can collect information or images of whoever gets into your premises, that means you collect visual personal data about these people. The other one is if, for example, an organization has a call center, and in this call center, you're able to collect, you record the calls that you receive. That means you actually also collect audio, personal data of your beneficiaries or individuals that are reaching out to you. So you have to tap this. However, if also the CCTV cameras that you have in your premises have voice in them, it's important that you also tap on the part of audio. The other one is internet or similar activity. This one is really for organizations that have websites. Usually websites have something called cookies, and cookies collect specific information about computers that interact with that website. So it's important for you to verify whether the organization's website collects cookies, and if it collects cookies, what kind of information it collects. Does it collect browsing history? Does it collect the search history, IP addresses, or interaction with the website? The other one is geolocation data. Geolocation data really means information about location of a specific device. So let us say, for example, an organization has GPS trackers in its vehicles or in its motorcycles. If it has such GPS trackers, it means that if, for example, if an employee is in that car and the car left maybe Kampala, the organization would be able to know where that employee is at that time. So if, for example, if your vehicles or company motorcycles have these GPS trackers, you need to tap this part of geolocation data. Geolocation data can also mean where, for example, your computers, mobile phones that are provided by the organization have trackers within them. If they have trackers within them, it means that the organization is able to know where individuals who hold these specific devices are at all times. So where that is the case, you also have to tap the part of geolocation data. Like I stated, this part here is for us or for an organization to inform us of the specific data that it collects. So if, for example, there are GPS trackers, it means that you're able to know location of individuals in those devices that you are tracking. The other one is education information. So here, usually if you have employees, before recruiting them, you require from them education qualifications. Now, this is also personal data because we say personal data is anything that can identify a person. It could be a certificate, it could be a transcript. Where an organization collects such information, you also need to check the part of education qualifications. The other one is professional or employment-related information. Now, this is where a person has already been employed. Do you collect information related to appraisals? You need to tap the part of performance evaluation. Do you collect information related to disciplinary actions? You need to tap the part of disciplinary actions. Do you collect information related to membership of professional associations by your employees as an organization? You need to tap that part as well. So on inferences drawn from other personal data to create individual profiles, here what we specifically are looking at is organizations that, for example, collect information and then maybe share it with an organization, another entity, or do it locally to try and understand maybe data analytics. So let us say you collect information of beneficiaries and you try to understand maybe beneficiaries prefer this to the other. Maybe they prefer this kind of service if it is provided on the internet and not if it is provided on a phone which does not have internet. So if you do that as an organization, from the personal data you collect, you also get analytics of the behaviors of your beneficiaries. You're supposed to look at these options. Does the data analytics try to look at preferences of these data subjects? Does it try to look at their characteristics? Does it look at their behavior? You look at what is most relevant and kindly check those boxes. Now, this last one under this part is special personal data. Special personal data really means the kind of personal data that requires more protection, because usually if it is compromised, a person would have more adverse effects. And if you look at the kind of personal data that is in this section, it includes things like race or ethnic origin, political opinion, religious or philosophical beliefs, trade union membership details. So if as an organization you collect any of this information, it's important for you to check those boxes. But then what you should not usually forget is financial information under this part, because if you're paying your staff, it means that you collect information, for example, their bank account details, their bank names, and all their bank account names rather. It means that you collect such information. If also you provide insurance, because you provide an assessment to know the medical records of your employees, you should also tap the part of health status or medical records, because that assessment actually gives you a picture of a person's medical records, which is their personal information. So you should, once you come to this part, if you provide insurance, for example, or if you pay your staff, you should not forget these two parts. However, health status or medical records is also relevant for organizations that provide health-related services to their beneficiaries. If, for example, you provide such, and let us say to HIV, to persons with HIV, you provide services to them, it means that you collect their status first before you actually provide such a kind of service. So you should also not forget this part. So just to maybe recap on this part, we're majorly looking for the source of data. Who do you collect from this personal data? And also, what kind of personal data do you collect from them? So while filling in the second part, kindly ensure to put in your mind each of the sources while doing that. Now, the next part we need to look at is on purpose and retention. Purpose and retention, we're going to look at majorly the part on for what purpose and then the retention period. So under for what purpose, this is what in data protection we refer to as legal basis of collection of personal data. So under the Data Protection and Privacy Act, you are required to collect personal data. Okay. Pardon me. Under the Data Protection and Privacy Act, you are required to collect personal data under specific grounds that are provided under the law. Now, these grounds are actually provided in this part. Of course, consent is not here. However, it is one of the grounds. The rest of the grounds are provided here. So under this first part, what we require from you is for you to give us information on why you actually collect personal data. This is what we call as the legal base. This is what we call the legal basis or legal grounds of collection of personal data. The first one is collection or processing is required by the law. So if as an organization you collect personal data as a requirement of the law, let us say we said our source of personal data is employees. We're going to try and marry the two. Let us say it's employees. We collect maybe their bank name. We collect maybe their name, we collect their age, and let us say the Employment Act requires us to collect that information, or the Income Tax Act requires us to collect that information. The NSSF Act also requires us to collect that information. It means that as an organization, you collect information as a requirement of the law, because before you provide social security benefits, you collect, you have to get the information, you have to get information that relates to a particular staff. So if the NSSF Act requires you to do that, or if the Employment Act requires you to do that, you need to check the box on collection is required by the law. The other one is this specific one on performance of a public duty is also for government bodies, so you will not check it. The other one is provision of services or products to individuals. If you collect information, let us say to provide a service to beneficiaries in a specific community, you need to check this box or provide services, stroke products to individuals. The other one, of course, like we already stated, our organization collects information of employees to be able to onboard them. So if you collect information of employees to be able to onboard them, you also have to check the box on staff onboarding and human resource management. The other one is, like we already said, one of our sources is suppliers or contractors. So if we collect information during, let us say, procurement or during contract signing, and it is for us to be able to enter into a contract with a supplier or a contractor, that means also one of the purposes is supplier or contractor onboarding. The other one is for compliance with a legal obligation. Here, for example, Ministry of Gender will requires organizations that are working with orphans or vulnerable children to provide some information, some specific information in the OVC MIS. If there is such a legal obligation by, let us say, a regulator that you're required to collect specific information, you also need to check the box on compliance with the legal obligation. The other one is for general administration. If, for example, you're collecting information of visitors and guests, you're actually collecting it for the administration purposes by the organization. So if we already said earlier, one of our sources was visitors and guests. If you collect that kind of information before people enter the premises, and that information is for general administration, you also need to check the box on general administration. Now, the next thing that we require, that is required under the portal, is for you to provide the specific laws, because here you had stated that you're required by the law to collect personal data. We now also require you to provide us with the specific laws that require you to collect this personal data. So like we stated, NSSF Act can be one of them. The other one can also be the Employment Act. The other one can be the NGO Act, because you also provide returns. And when you're providing returns, you're supposed to provide information on a director, provide information on a secretary. So while doing that, it means that the NGO Act also requires you to collect personal data. It can be the Companies Act, because while making statutory filings or providing returns, some personal data that is required. Then specify the service. You'll have to specify for us the service that your organization provides. Then you specify the legal obligation. If there is a legal obligation under which you collect personal data, like we stated earlier, kindly inform us. So the next part is on total records. In case you have a picture of the total records, of the number of total records that your entity collects, you can provide that information. However, if you do not, like you can see here, it is optional. You can leave it out. The other one, of course, is the percentage annual growth. This is for you just to forecast. If this year you collected 2,000 records, what is really the growth? How has it been growing over time? This is also optional. If you're able to provide that information, you should. In case you're not, you can leave it for now. It is optional. Now, the last part is on retention. The retention period can be decided by either a policy within your entity. It can be the retention schedule in the records management policy that I spoke about earlier. It can be also determined by a specific law. If, for example, a specific law, for example, states that information related to taxes should be kept for this kind of period, or information related to employees should be retained for this kind of period, that's the period you can provide there. However, also, you can determine this retention period with the period within which you require that personal data. For example, if a contractor entered into a contract with an organization, after the end of that contract, if you require the personal data only for that contract, that can also be the retention period of the entity. So while deciding or while placing a figure here, you should be able to have all that in mind. Is there a particular law? Is there a schedule? Is there a specific period within which you require this personal data as an entity? You'll just give us an average of that period in this part. So with that, really, I've come to the end of my presentation on these two parts. But just to recap, this first part is on source of personal data, the categories of persons you collect from personal data. The second part is the specific personal data collected. This part 4 is on what purpose, the legal grounds under which you collect personal data. And then, of course, you specify for us the law, specify the service, and the legal obligation. With that, thank you so much. There were some questions that arose the last time, which I'm going to also handle, and also some which of course within the chat, which Anita will read and we handle. Now, the first one that was not handled last time was related to, in case a data protection officer leaves an organization, what is the process of replacing a data protection officer? This one is specifically, the answer to that is, what you do is, still it is locally within your organization, determine who can become the new data protection officer. And what you'll do is you write to us a formal letter. This formal letter can either be hand delivered to the personal data protection office, which sits at Lugogo Bypass plus 7A at Palm Courts, or you can send it to that email address that is shown on your screen, but it has to be a formal letter. And this formal letter should provide us with details on the name of the new data protection officer, their telephone details, their address, the title they hold within the entity. Yes, that is the major information we'd require from you. The other one is on whether the PDPO is under any specific ministry or agency. Now, like I stated earlier, the PDPO is an independent office under the National Information Technology Authority. It also is under the Ministry of ICT. So that is majorly what I can say related to that question. The other one was on whether a data protection officer can be from the head office abroad. The answer to this is that yes, a data protection officer can be from the head office abroad. However, what we require is that data protection officer should be able to carry out the roles that are provided under Regulation 47.3 of the Data Protection and Privacy Regulations. So if the data protection officer abroad is not able to respond to requests, is not able to carry out assessments, is not able to provide information to individuals from whom you collect personal data, the guidance is that you should consider having one who is within reach and able to carry out those specific roles that are provided under the law. The other one is, how about those registering and finding issues? How can they be helped? Now, in case you're having an issue during your registration, I provided an email on this particular slide that is shown currently. Kindly reach out to us. We are very responsive and we'll be able to assist you. With that, I think I've handled all the questions that were not answered the last time. We can move to the ones of today. Over to you, Anita. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. That was very informative. I will quickly go to the questions in the Q&A panel. The first question is, why registering? I mistyped the organization's name. Is there a provision to edit this through your platform? And maybe, Ian, as we answer this, you could also answer the question of whether they are able to edit applications as well, not necessarily the organization's name. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Anita. That's a good one. Now, if you make a mistake and you have, for example, submitted the application already, or because the organization name is automatically auto-populated, what you'll do is you'll reach out to us, still through this email address. We'll be able to make those fields active for you to carry out that change. Thank you very much. So reach out to us, we shall be able to assist you.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question is, after failing to comply with a set timeline, does the regulator give us another period?
Okay, on that, from the circular of the NGO Bureau, it is clear that there will not be a further period. So what we are saying is we encourage you to carry out your registration before the end of November. We are here to help you at all times. In case it's an issue related to how to get to the portal, how to carry out the registration, we shall be able to help you. But it's important for you to heed to the period that has been provided by the NGO Bureau, and that is by the end of this month.
Thank you so much. The next question is, the law also talks of any person that collects personal data is required to register. Does having other people's phone contacts in the phone qualify for registration?
Thank you very much. I'll try so much to just keep it at the standard. As long as an individual or an organization, which is both in government or private, collects personal data, they are required to register. As it is now, the office has not exempted any kind of collection and processing of personal data, has not exempted any persons who collect or use personal data from registering. So if you collect or process personal data, you're required to register. However, I'll also ask Becca to add anything that he has related to that question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Now, as you've stated, every individual organization, be it public or private, and you're collecting personal data, you're required to register. Much as we haven't exempted anyone, at least we are following global standards. If you're using personal information for personal use, such as storing information, part of the contact list for personal use, such as saving people's numbers in your phone book, you're not required to register. But if you do that saving for purposes of running a business, that's when you're required to register. Now, the other would be maybe setting up a WhatsApp group or any website or platform for purposes maybe of organizing funds for an event, a burial, funeral, wedding, and then after that period, that group is closed or the website is shut down, you're not required to register. So the whole point about who is exempted for now is where you use it for personal use. But where you go ahead and use that same information for businesses and anything else, you are required to register. Thank you. Over to you, Ian.
Okay, thank you very much, Becca. So like you have had, the standard is there. However, if it is for personal use, you may collect it and process it without necessarily registering with us. Thank you. Over to you, Anita.
Thank you, Ian and Becca. The next question is, under FIA registration, we were issued a certificate. So what do we receive as proof of registration under this act? Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just like you've stated, even us, as soon as you register with the Personal Data Protection Office, you're also provided with a certificate, and this certificate is actually provided within this very account that we have spoken about. The account that you created and you used for registration is the same one that is the same one where that certificate is also provided. We shall provide information, of course, on where you get it, but it's still provided within that same account. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is, what if the question, this is about the form we were filling, what if the question does not apply to my organization? Is there space for us to write not applicable, or we just skip the question?
If in case you're talking about the parts where you need to check a box, like I stated, you only check what is relevant to you. You may skip the parts that are not relevant, but it's important to put in mind the sources that you told us earlier. while thinking about the specific personal data that you collect, for example. If it does not apply to you, you can leave that. However, if, for example, you collect, if you told us that your category, the category of the organization is human and health activities, for example, and you leave out collection of medical records and health status, would usually reach out to you to get better information on whether you actually provide that service, but do not collect health status. So the answer to your question is simply that if something does not apply to you under that part, you just leave it. However, under data protection officer, like stated already in both the first part of this series and this part, kindly we guide that you should have a data protection officer to be our focal point. We provide these officers with some training on how to handle their roles. We have monthly webinars on that. So we really guide that you have these officers, designate or recruit.
Thank you, Ian. The next question is registration all there is for organizations to do, or are we supposed to renew and go through the same process after a certain period of time?
Okay, thank you very much. Under the data protection and privacy regulations, which is one of the laws we spoke about earlier as a law applicable, the law provides that registration with the Personal Data Protection Office is valid for 1 year. So after that period, you are required to renew your application. Now, under this same, if you'll just let me, I'll just show you the account again to show you what would happen. So under this same dashboard, you'll be able to see a part with renewals. That is where the renewal will be done. However, if it's your first time, it is actually registration instead. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Another question is, someone asks, how many people are supposed to fill in a form for an organization?
I do not get that question clearly. However, even one person, as long as they are able to fill in each of the parts, can be able to complete this registration. Remember, it provides you with parts to check boxes in. So even one person, but usually, of course, the guidance is one person, but reach out to the information security officer, for example, reach out to HR, reach out to the different departments to be able to know what is actually collected, because you may be in a specific department and do not know what is collected by the other. So what you can instead do is reach out to those other departments and they'll be able to give you the information they also collect.
Thank you very much. I believe it has been answered well. Another question is, someone is asking, kindly provide clarity on the different policies that one needs to develop that are under this act.
So this was spoken about earlier. Really, there are 4 in number. The first one is a privacy notice. A privacy notice is really an external facing data protection policy. Yeah, this one is to your beneficiaries. It tells them of information. It tells them, for example, of what you collect from them, how you use the personal data you collect from them. It tells them also of what rights they have under the Data Protection and Privacy Act. It tells them how they can enforce them in your organization. It tells them of their right to complain to the regulator, which is the PDPO. It tells them of how you secure their personal data. Now, this privacy notice, because we say it is external facing, it should be on maybe a website, so that when I get on your website, I'm able to know whether there's any information being collected from me. If there is a web form, it's able to also tell me that this kind of information will be collected through a web form, for example. The other one is a privacy policy. This one is internal facing. It has almost the same process as the privacy notice, except that this one applies to employees, suppliers, contractors, and any person who is internal and uses the personal data that you collect as an entity. So those are the first 2: privacy notice, privacy policy. The other one is a records management policy. This one really speaks to how you store the personal data that you collect. Then the information security policy, is on how you ensure the integrity of the personal data you collect. So the first one is privacy policy, privacy notice, information security policy, records management policy. I'm very sure we shall have various other webinars where we shall look at these. Even the last webinar we had in the last month of October, we actually looked at how to develop a privacy policy. You can also find that on our YouTube channel for you to know how to develop a privacy policy. But those are the major four.
Okay, thank you very much. I will move on to the next question. Does this law and requirement apply to private corporations as well?
Yes, this was answered earlier. Under its scope, it applies to any individual or entity that is both public or private, meaning a private entity or even government, that collects and processes personal data, whether of people living in Uganda if the entity is within Uganda, or of Ugandan citizens if the entity is outside Uganda. Thank you very much. So yes, it applies to private entities.
All right, thank you very much. The next question, do you offer support in the formulation of the organization's data protection policy?
That's a very nice one. Now, after completion of your registration, we usually share with you a number of tools. The first one is a compliance self-assessment tool. Under this tool, there are specific sheets on it that provide you with information of what is required in the privacy policy, the records management policy, and the privacy notice. So with this tool, you'll be able to develop one that is relevant to your organization. We also provide you with an information self-assessment tool that will help guide you on how to develop an information security policy. So yes, we have tools that can guide you on how to develop those policies, but also we are carrying out webinars. The one last month looked at how to develop a privacy policy. I'm quite sure that in the future, we shall look at how to develop the others. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I will move on to the next question. We paid for 3 years, but the certificate we received is valid for only 1 year. Was that an error? Over to you.
Okay, no, that was not an error. Like I just said a few minutes ago, the law allows us to only provide you with registration for 1 year. So maybe just also to pass on information, kindly, you should register and pay for 1 year. However, where you pay for more years, you can keep that evidence, you can keep that receipt, and you can use it next year. However, we shall require you to still renew the application. However, this time, instead of getting a new receipt, maybe paying afresh, you just need to place that receipt under the part on payment evidence, and it will still be considered. So it is not an error. It is just that our certificate can only be provided for 1 year. However, you can use that same payment evidence for the next 2 years as well, since you paid for 3 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Someone says they finished registering and payment as well, but how should they know that their registration was successful? Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Anita. Now, as soon as a certificate is issued, a notification is sent to the email that you provided as the organization email. First, you need to check that. However, like I also stated, one of the responsibilities of this office is for us to establish a register of all registered entities. You can also still go to our portal and know if your certificate has been issued, but also you can still reach out to us through this particular email I've provided for you to be able to know if there are any issues. So you can check that email that you provided with us. If there's that notification, you can check the register. However, in case there was something that was queried, a member of our team will reach out to you for you to be supported and to be guided on what should be changed. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Someone asks, what is the registration number required? Is it the one on the certificate of registration or incorporation?
Okay, thank you very much. Either of them is okay. But as an organization, you can of course put for us the one on your certificate of registration, but either is fine because both of them are your regulators. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. The next question is, if you had filled the application and submitted, but you realize that there's a lot of information that you didn't fill, where do you go or how do you review the details?
It depends on the stage of registration you are. Something maybe that I did not state earlier, while going about any of these stages during the application process, there is a button, there are two buttons at the end of those, at the bottom of each of those pages. One of them is next, the other one is save. While going about any of those pages, kindly ensure to save the information you're providing so that you're able to find it. Now, if you're at the stage where you have not yet submitted, you can actually make changes. Yeah. If you have already submitted, kindly reach out to us through the email that is provided on this slide. We shall be able to activate those particular parts you need to make changes in for you to make the changes. Thank you. So if you've not yet submitted, you can make the changes yourself. However, if you have submitted, you'd need us to activate the parts for you to make the change.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. The next question is, how long does it take to get a certificate after registration?
Usually it would be between 2 to 3 days. However, if you have completed everything rightly, you have provided us with the categories, you've provided us with the data protection officer, the purpose, you provided the right laws, and the other two parts on disclosure and security information, you can even receive your certificate within 1 day. But usually it's between 2 to 3 days. Usually between that period, you'll be able to get your certificate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. I am going to combine these two because they are almost the same. One is a small scale farm with a visitor's book supposed to register. And then the next one is about churches and schools. Are they required to register as well? Over to you.
Thank you. I'll just reiterate the standard again. The law states that as long as an individual or an entity, both in government or private, that includes schools, that includes churches, that includes a small farm, as long as they collect or process personal data, they are required to comply with the law. The first line of compliance is registration with the Personal Data Protection Office. Now, as a small farm, it is not only visitors whose personal data you're collecting. You collect personal data, for example, of your employees. You collect personal data of also your suppliers, and also you collect personal data of your clients. So if you are, as long as you are doing that, as long as you collect a name, age, marital status, bank name, NSSF details of any of those categories, you're collecting personal data, and as we have said, the standard, you must register. Thank you. Also, on the other part of churches and schools, yes, because personal data in churches may be collected during tithing, it can be collected when a person wants to get married, it can be collected during baptism. For schools, when a child is getting into school, there's information that is required to be able to provide them with the service. As long as you do that, whether you're a church, whether you're a school or a small farm, you need to comply, and the first level of compliance is actually registration. So we shouldn't, first of all, we shouldn't think that the only way of complying is registration. Currently, we're just running a series on registration. It's the reason why we are speaking about it a lot. However, we should just know that the first line of compliance is registration. There are other obligations that are provided under the law. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. I'll go to the next question. Before taking pictures of any beneficiary or other details of the beneficiary, are consent forms enough for them to sign, or the Data Protection Office will provide more details of the paperwork that can be signed? Over to you.
Now, under the legal grounds under which you can collect or process personal data, One of them is consent. So if you're able to provide consent, if a person is able to provide you with consent which is freely given, that means you do not tell them that for you to actually receive this grant or this particular money, I have to first take your picture. Also, if the consent is unambiguous, the person is saying a definite yes, they're not saying yes, but also if that consent is specific, it is specific to the taking of those pictures. If the consent, if you receive the consent with all that taken into mind, it is freely given, it is unambiguous, it is specific, and it is informed. The person knows, for example, you're going to take a picture of them, what you're going to use that picture for, and all that, and they're able to provide a positive, let us say, for example, a tick, or they're able to sign. If a person is able to do that, that suffices, because you'd be collecting their personal data while taking that picture through under the particular what? Legal ground of consent. So consent must be freely given, should be specific, unambiguous, and informed. As long as that happens, you'd have received consent, but also it's you should look out. The office would, of course, maybe come up with a number of guidance, different guidance notes on how to do that. Also, maybe in case Becca has anything else to add, you could add it at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I don't have anything else useful to add. You rightly stated it so.
Okay,
thank you very much. Over to you, Anita.
Okay, thank you very much. I am going to move to the next question. Someone asks, if an organization paid subscription fees for 4 years once during registration, do we still have to renew every year still?
Thank you, Anita. Like I already stated, yes, you need to renew each year. The reason is, as we're going about this registration, you realize that we want you to also appreciate the kind of personal data that you collect. You may previously have not known that when you place a vehicle tracker, you place a GPS tracker in a car, you'd be collecting information of the person in the car. So if you realize this is for you to actually understand the personal data you collect. So as an organization, in the next year, you may decide to collect different information. You may stop collecting particular kinds of information. You may stop disclosing personal data to a specific group of persons. So each year you're required to renew. Of course, most of this information from your application this year is auto-populated to the next year. However, we require you to renew each year. All you do in case you're paid for 4 years is keep placing the same payment evidence in each of the other 3 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question I'll go to is, apart from the privacy notice, can the rest of the other 3 policies be covered in only one policy document?
Well, yes, as long as, first of all, maybe to state it clearly, not having these policies currently should not stop you from registering. Yeah, what you require is that go ahead with registration. We provide you with the tools, make sure you get the policies. On whether they can be in one document, in case they fulfill all what we expect from you, what is provided in the tools, yes, they can be in one document. However, in order to make it easier for your staff, because usually these policies are actually made for staff, there is a policy on the privacy policy, the information security policy, and the records management policy. These are a little bit different sectors within an entity. So in order to make it easier for your employees, the guidance is that they should be different documents. However, of course, they can be the same as long as in them is everything that is required under the compliance and information self-assessment tools. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. I am going to take only one question and we are going to close because time has really run out. So the question is, this one says payment registration has challenged me at the URA portal because the Personal Data Protection Office is not displayed to choose from as a department. What can I do?
Okay, thank you so much. We have a video on our YouTube on how to pay. However, what you're going to do is you will choose the ministry or agency head as National Information Technology Authority, which is NITA Uganda. The next part will be under that will be DPO. After DPO, it will be application to register. Then the next one will be register. I'll ask Anita also as we end, because she said we're coming to an end of this session, to also play that video on how to register, so that any other persons who have a similar question will be able to appreciate how to carry out an assessment and also how to get the PRN, which is used for payment during the registration process. Thank you so much. Over to you, Anita. Kindly share your screen with that video for people to be able to understand that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ian. I will be sharing the video in a few.
I have just seen a specific question here that I will handle as Anita shares that. It relates to the fact that the renewal certificate may be issued before the actual end of the period of registration. So what happens is the law requires that during renewal, you start your renewal at least 3 months to the end of the period that you registered. However, the certificate of registration will still bear the date of your first registration, even where the renewal is done. So it is no months would be lost, as the question is. No months would be lost because even if you started your renewal 3 months earlier, as the law requires, you'd still have the date as the date on which you did your first registration. Thank you so much. Anita is ready to show us the video. Over to you, Anita.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you've been able to watch the video and know what you're supposed to do as far as payment is concerned. If you do not mind, we are going to go up to at least 11:30 so that we are able to answer most of your questions. So I will go back to the question. First, there was a question about Form 3. Someone said they are having challenges with commissioning it. Ian, I will request you to start on the question to do with Form 3.
Okay, very well. Maybe the first thing, kindly, what you can do is please reach out to us. We'll be able to assist you. However, for the rest of the people in attendance, in case a lawyer rejects to commission Form 3, kindly ask them to direct you to any other commission of oaths, because other commissioners of oaths are actually commissioning this form because it's a form that is provided under the law. So in case a particular lawyer refuses, ask them to direct you to any other commission of oaths who will be able to assist you. But the person who has asked this question, kindly reach out to us through that email that I provided. We shall be able to assist you with commissioning. We shall be able to guide you and also direct you on where you can go for commissioning. Thank you so much. Over to you, Anita.
All right, thank you very much, Ian. Another question I would like you to take on is, someone asks, do you provide a soft copy of the information we have filled in the form after?
Yes, we do. The answer is yes. So when you reach the last stage, that will be taken on by my other colleagues. When you reach the last stage, which is step 6, there's a part for you to review and download all the information that you have provided to us for the registration. So there are 3 buttons at the end: one to submit, another one on preview, another one on download. You can preview and know all that information, but also you can download that information. But still, this information will always be on this account. You can always check the account whenever you need that information. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. Another question is, the law mentions that the certificate of registration is valid for 12 months. However, sometimes renewal is issued before the end of 12 months. Oh, I think you had answered that, so I'll just go to another question.
Maybe just to restate, as she's getting the next question, like I had said, the law requires you to start your registration, your renewal, at least 3 months before the expiry of the 1 year. However, the date that would still be shown on your renewed certificate would be the first date that you registered. Let us say this year or last year, that would still be the same date that is reflected. So there would be no months that are lost, as the question states. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. The next question is, we were told to pay directly to the bank and scan the payment receipt then attach. Please clarify on this. How do we prove payment status?
Like Anita has already shown in the video, kindly carry out an assessment. After carrying out the assessment, go with the PRN to the bank. The bank should be able to assist you. You make the payment. Now, when you get to step 6, there's a part where you're required to place in the payment evidence. Kindly just upload it there. Upload the receipt that you received from the bank, and yeah, that will be your proof of payment. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ian. Another question is about commissioning of Form 3. Someone says, do we have to do the commissioning of Form 3 every year during renewal as well?
Okay, that's a nice one. The current guidance is that if you commissioned Form 3 this year, you can still use the same commissioned Form 3 in your subsequent renewals. So yes, so no, you wouldn't be required to commission in every year while carrying out the renewal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. Another question is, can there be a way to have at least 2 people designated as DPOs, just in case the other DPO is not in office?
That's a good one. Now, usually what we actually guide is that a data protection officer should have a team that assists them in carrying out their role. If you notice, data protection cuts across all the different departments. As HR, they collect some information. As finance, they collect some information. As legal, some information is collected. As the people in the community, some information is collected. So yes, for us, you'll inform us of the data protection officer. It can be that one person who is designated. However, you can have a person deputizing them, or even a group that helps them, a team that helps them in carrying out their role. There can be a person within the HR department, within the finance department, who may form what can be referred to as a data protection working group, a data protection working committee, who help this officer in carrying out their role. They can have, of course, meetings regularly where the officer trains them and for them to know how to carry out their different roles. So yes, you can have as many people. However, for us, we only would want one person who is notified to us. You can have an entire working group. You can have one person deputizing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I have another question here. Which data protection officer is captured in the application? Is it the authority that is mentioned in Section 4 of the Data Protection and Privacy Act, or any designated officer within the company's data protection office?
So Section 4 of the Data Protection and Privacy Act establishes the Personal Data Protection Office. Now, this office is not what we're asking you for. Data Protection Officer is that officer designated or appointed within an entity. Like Isabella said last week, it should be a person who has an independent role and is not active in the collection of personal data. The reason for this is that usually if a person is collecting personal data, they cannot be their watchdog again. So it could be a person in the legal team, an auditor, someone in compliance, and all that. So the answer to that question simply is no, it is not the PDPO that is established under Section 4. However, it is that officer, that person who is either recruited or added a role within the entity. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. The next question is on sensitive data. Someone says, what happens when an organization has no capacity to collect audio data and has no cameras for visual data?
Thank you. Like we stated earlier, if you do not collect that kind of information, you do not necessarily have to check those boxes. You only have to check boxes of the particular data that you're collecting. If you're collecting, for example, people's bank account details, but you're not providing them with insurance, for example, so you're paying them a salary, but not providing them with insurance. Under special personal data, you'd have to check the box of financial information. However, you would not have to check the box of health status or medical records. That's of course where the organization is also not doing work related to health. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. I have a question on, do you have a toll-free line? How can we reach out to the office?
We currently do not have a toll-free line. However, on our website, let me just share that screen. There is provision made for specific phone contacts of the government service desk, which you can use, and the government service desk can always reach out to us, and we support whenever there is anything. But also, like I stated earlier, you can still use the email I showed you. So on my screen, under contact us on our website, you're able to see these particular numbers. These are numbers of the government service desk, which can be used to reach out to us But also, like I stated earlier, kindly use that email registration@pdpo.go.ug. We are very responsive and would be able to assist you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. I am going to read one more question, which I think is the last question. As someone is asking, how do I get a registration number? And is this applicable to a very small organization where we are only about 3 to 4 people?
Thank you so much. I'll answer the second one first. Is this applicable to a small organization with 3 or 4 persons? The standard is as long as you collect personal data. So if those 3 persons during their onboarding, or even if the director, while they were incorporating the entity, had to give in information to, let us say, the company, because the company is actually a legal person, is distinct from that director as well. If the information of the director had to be taken, and while these 3 people are being got, the 3 people also had to provide information for them to be onboarded as staff. As long as such information is collected, you're supposed to comply with this law and therefore have to register. However, even if you're 3 or 4 and you provide a service, and while providing that service, you also require personal data, you are also required to comply with the data protection and privacy laws, and of course, register with the Personal Data Protection Office. Thank you so much, Anita.
All right, thank you very much. I think we are coming to the close of this webinar. I have put a link in the chat. Kindly click on it and give us feedback on this training. Thank you very much for attending today's webinar. I hope all your questions have been answered. Please note that we shall have our next webinar on Wednesday next week. The meeting details will be shared on the PDPO, NGO Bureau, and Defenders Protection Initiative social media pages. If you missed our first training, please kindly visit our YouTube channel to watch the live recording. And if you're having any issues to do with your registration, please send an email to registration@pdpo.go.ug. I'll repeat it, registration@pdpo.go.ug. And for those that were asking about the presentation, please note that the presentation will be shared to the emails that you used to register for this webinar. Otherwise, you're encouraged to start on your registration if you haven't, keeping in mind, of course, that the deadline for registration is 31st November. I would like to commend the NGO Bureau and Defenders Protection Initiative for their continued support in organizing these webinars. Thank you very much. I am going to give a few minutes to members to be able to fill the link in the chat. And then I'm going to give it about 3 minutes and then I'll end this webinar. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.